Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're with us in class today. We broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains right here from the farm, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. We're also heard on Republic Broadcasting, KLID, numerous affiliate radio stations throughout the country, on the internet, and there's a telephone listen line. Actually, there are many telephone listen lines. You can find them at usaprepares.com. And one of them is 605-477-3249. However, it's stuck. And we're working to get that fixed. Let's see. Nathan's engineering the broadcast today. Thank you, Nathan. Rich Scheben's with us in Montana, offgridmontana.com. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Thank you, Vincent Finelli. Always a pleasure. How are you doing this morning?
Well, I'm doing great. You know, all right, let me share this. So, Dr. Norman Shealy had done a study with Mrs. Finelli and me, and it was a study to determine, this was well over a year ago, to determine whether essential oils would cause lengthening of the telomeres, which is a measurement of, well, our youthfulness, really. And I just got a call this morning, and the latest results are that from the blood test that we had done, that I'm getting younger. Now, I was really, really sick, and so the protocol that I've been on is lengthening my telomeres. And we can get maybe into a little more detail about this tomorrow with Dr. Shealy. He can talk about the results and what's happened. But, I was really feeling lousy. And the latest results are that I'm getting younger. And according to this, I'm doing really, really, really well. I'm getting younger. Can you imagine that? After being as sick as I was, coughing up blood for months. So that was this morning's call. So how am I doing? Great. Yeah. And thanks for asking. Oh, hey, Rich, we've got truck driver Jay who's calling in right now. Let me put truck driver Jay on. You're in Washington State, clear across the country from the East Coast. Truck driver Jay, welcome.
Good morning, Vince. I called you earlier, reported in on that call-in listening line. It's stuck on a show from several weeks ago that you said that it's being worked on. Good topic on the telomeres. How does that work?
Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. Let me defer that until tomorrow with Dr. Norman Shealy. He is quite the expert on that, and so we'll ask him. And if you'd like to call in, let's do it at that time. But I can tell you that it's a way of measuring our aging process, and typically our telomeres get shorter and shorter as we get older. And mine got longer. And he'll tell us about that tomorrow. How about that?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay. Anything else, Jay?
I don't know.
I've got a comment on what we need to do. Support at xenoradio.com. SUPPORT at Zeno, ZENO, radio.com. And if you would be so kind, class, as to send them an email and say that USA Prepares telephone listen line is stuck again, and could they please fix it? That would be kind of nice. That way you'll be able to listen to real-time radio on your telephone. And USA Prepares is a pretty large user of the telephone listen line. And, after a while, if people are used to just listening on the telephone, and that's what they do as they work, drive their trucks, maybe, listen while they're driving. I'm sure that that's something that you might have considered doing at one time or another, or all the time. Well, that's a problem. So we'd like to get that fixed. So support at Zeno, ZENO, radio.com. In the subject line, you might want to put that USA Prepares is stuck. And let me give you the telephone listen line that is stuck. And that's 605-477-3249. 605-477-3249. Now, please bear in mind that Zeno Radio doesn't just have USA Prepares on the telephone listen line. There are lots and lots of broadcasts that are on their listen line or listen lines, and we each have our own call-in number. So when you call in 605-477-3249, that's for us. There are other telephone numbers that are for other broadcasters. Okay, so that's one that's for us. That's one that's got a problem. Oh, let me give you another one. This one, Republic Broadcasting, John Stadtmiller's network, carries us verbatim. All of our commercials and everything, just copies that off the satellite or off the internet and replays it a little later in the day. Well, that telephone listen line for us is 605-562-5111. And then that would be option
No, that
number
one's stuck
4.
too.
Okay. Well, all right. So there you have it. So we need to get Zeno Radio, working on this a little harder maybe. So, class, if you wouldn't mind, maybe if they get a few hundred emails or 1,000 emails, they might say, you know what? We ought to fix this, because all we're doing is answering emails for USA Prepares. So, Truck Driver Jay, thank you so much.
Yep.
Okay. We'll see you. Thank you.
All right.
Bye. So, Truck Driver Jay called the farm this morning and reported that. And I suggested that he call in and let us all know, in his words, what he was experiencing. So, by the way, I cannot fix this myself. I mean, I send emails, please fix this, please fix this, please fix this. And I don't know what happens. I don't know if they say they're working on it or what, but I can't fix it by myself. But with little help from the class, I think we'll get it fixed a little faster. So that's that. So, Rich, would you share with us, before we get into today's topics, the transition from going from all you have to do is flip the switch to power up whatever devices you want, plug in the devices you want when you were in New York as a pharmaceutical representative, to going off-grid when, you probably have to say, do I really want to flip this switch and deplete my battery bank for the current right now? Do I need to do that? Maybe I don't need to do it. How does it affect the devices that you now use versus before? Can you tell us, the transition?
Sure, you bet. But let me just comment on what you were going through with Jay and your phone line. Sounds like you're dealing with analogous to net neutrality rules. In other words, censorship because of your conservative or libertarian views on truth. And the powers that be obviously do not want truth because they want to basically insult, degrade, and disrespect every group out there by lowering the bars of standards and expectations. And that's why race baiting and gender baiting and sexual orientation baiting is so common on the mainstream media. So it's going to be an uphill battle, but people are waking up because of the Streisand effect, basically, where people are realizing that their views and their information is being stunted, and people are saying, no more. We're going to start controlling our own destiny. But going back to your question regarding living off-grid, Vince, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure in many different realms. One of the pleasures that come to mind is the fact that I've given tours to thousands of people, including many people in Europe, some pretty big names. I'm not going to name drop because it doesn't do anybody any good, but people who are looking for Plan Bs, because as you know, I'm really big on the statistics on what's happening to America. Like, for example, 78% of Americans live in paycheck to paycheck, and they're looking for alternative choices. They're looking for ways that they can cut costs. And when I talk about financial, economic, social, and political reasons why we need to be more self-sufficient, there is a big difference between financial and economic. And the financial example would be if I brought in electricity through the corporate grid back in 13 years ago when I started living on this property, and 11 years ago living off-grid, because I lived on-grid in a different location for 2 years so I can reap the benefits of the capital gains exemption law when I sold a piece of property and a small cottage on it that I had built. Anyway, if I brought in electricity back then, it was a $40,000 bill. It's probably double that right now. My whole off-grid system, everything, generator, tri-meter, inverter charger, batteries, DC disconnect, you name it, the whole system, including the professional to help me install it, cost me $15,000. That's pretty easy math. So that's why it's not necessarily in the economic perspective, but in the financial perspective. Plus, you gain skill sets. Besides all the tours I've given and all the people that I've enlightened on this lifestyle, the monetary benefits are very obvious. But the skill sets are, it's something you don't forget. You know, for example, like when I was charging my batteries the other day, because now we're in the winter months, we are less than, and most people who live on grid don't even think about this. They think about Thanksgiving, they think about Christmas, they think about New Year's. I think about winter solstice,
Mm-hmm.
which is December 21st. So we're 1 month, less than 1 month from the shortest day. So that's the way I think, and I'll answer the rest of the question after the break. That's it.
Rich Scheben's with us. OffGridMontana.com. So, Rich Scheben, we're talking about the transition from on-grid to off-grid living. And let me just share a couple quick comments before you continue. So we had a little get-together here at the farm for Thanksgiving. And we decided that Thanksgiving is just somebody picked the day, and well, we decided to have we pick our own day. Actually, we picked 2 days, and we are thankful. So we had a get together. John Statmiller came up from Texas. He's the owner of Republic Broadcasting, a dear friend. Lou Cassidy came here from Illinois. Norm Shealy from Missouri. Dr. Howard Shane and Dr. M.L. Shane were here, both dentists. Deborah Brewster. And I'm naming some of the instructors who are on the air with us. Deborah Brewster was in town from Arizona, and her husband, Bill Brewster. Peggy Gawley talks about Medicare insurance and the alternatives. So I was giving a tour of the farm, and there was this fascination with the solar array that we built, and the inverter and the charge controller and the battery bank and so forth. And what I realized, I mean, everyone was intently listening when I was giving this tour about how we fabricated the array out of surplus shelving that we bought that was used at Home Depot and Lowe's and, Sam's Club kind of thing. Heavy-duty shelving, how we cut it and welded it and built the piers out of concrete and it looks professionally done. It really does. Well, they were listening so intently, and it seems that there's a tremendous interest in going off grid, as you and we have. So, please continue.
Well, I just came back from putting a buck of firewood in my wood stove, which is part of the off-grid experience. And anyway, going back to the solar array part of it, the electronic version, you always hear me talk about we need to relearn the old 19th century skills that dovetail them with 21st century technology. And that's exactly what the solar array is 21st century technology, because it's all electronic. So there's certain things that you have to learn, like upkeep and care of the batteries, but that's changing, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But, you have to, when it comes to your trimeter, which is a tool which shows a lot of different units of measure, from voltage to amps, etc., amps from full, all this stuff, you have to set your charge points. When you're charging your batteries, lead-acid, deep-cycle batteries need to be charged almost full every 7 to 8 days. So you have to set your charge points for amperage, which goes down. I believe my number is 13 for my 24-volt system, my 675 amp-hour system. And my charge points for voltage, which increases, I believe it's set for 29.6. I have it written on my wall. But I'm pretty sure that's what it is. So, once you learn certain units of measures and how to do things, it's quite simple. But I mentioned that I'm going to go back to batteries in a minute. I use deep cycle lead acid batteries, and there's also the newer silicon salt batteries, which are getting very popular. They're sealed. They're basically no maintenance, like the lead acid deep cycle batteries. I use T105s, Trojan 105s, which is one of the cheapest batteries. My whole battery system cost me $1,500. Okay, so I should get at least 10 years out of that. I mean, that's a few dollars per day, maybe pennies per day if you really break it out over a period of time. And these silicon salt batteries, they're good for like minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay? Mm-hmm. And the fact that there's no maintenance makes life a lot simpler. And I was just reading an article about a week or two ago saying that there's a new battery called a Fisker battery. Okay? They're made for electronic vehicles, and they're basically competing against Musk's thin-film lithium batteries, which could be obsolete if what these Fisker batteries say they can do. 500 miles per charge, and they can charge often in less than 1 minute. They're called solid-state batteries. And if they could develop a deep cycle type for off-grid living, folks, there's no reason to ever be hooked up to the electric corporate grid again. And I feel that way right now. So think about the skill set that you're teaching to your kids that have been taught how to push buttons, manage paper, and be politically correct. So we're heading into new directions where we can be more self-sufficient. Vince?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that when we come back, because when what everyone realized as they were taking the tour is there are a lot of moving parts to this off-grid living lifestyle, the farming lifestyle. Rich Scheben with us, and we're talking about the off-grid lifestyle, and I mentioned that there are a lot of moving parts in this lifestyle. And let me just give you one example. Our solar battery array, or solar battery bank, has 40 cells, 40. And each one of these cells is 1.2 volts. So 40 times 1.2 volts is 48 volts. So we have a 48-volt system. And the electrolyte, the water in the electrolyte gets consumed. And as it gets consumed, we have to replace it. How often is that? Well, we check the electrolyte every day, believe it or not. That's one of the things that we have to do. And we can look through the translucent cell cases. And how much water, how much distilled water do we use? Well, it's staggering. We use 1 quart of water per cell. 1 quart times 40 cells is 10 gallons. 10 gallons of distilled water every 2 months. Okay? 10 gallons times 6 times a year is 60 gallons of distilled water. So where do you get distilled water? Well, you can buy it at the Chinese factory outlet. You can buy it at the supermarket. Or you can make your own. Well, that's another moving part. So now Vinny says this is nuts. We're not going to buy it at the Chinese factory outlet. I thought we might be using a lot less than that. Nope, no, we're not. We're using an enormous amount of distilled water. Well, we're going to make our own. So I have to fabricate a system to do that. And how am I going to do that, and where am I going to get the energy for it? Am I going to use propane? Am I going to use the sun? Am I going to use our outdoor wood furnace? How am I going to do it? Well, I'm still working on that. So, Rich, there are a lot of moving parts to this, and it's not just as simple as, well, just hook it up and life is the same as it was before. There is a learning curve. There are a lot of things to learn. It's a challenge. And I mentioned giving the tour. And the reason I mentioned that is because I believe that most of those watching the demonstration, showing them how this works, why it works, what we do, were drinking from a fire hose, really, because I tried to do it succinctly, quickly, and it was a lot of information that they didn't know before. And it's a pretty steep learning curve. And do I know all the answers? Absolutely not. I don't. I know things that don't work. I know things that work. And I want to optimize the things that work so that they work even better. And that's what this off-grid lifestyle is like. Would you agree with that?
I would. But I got to tell you that I use a lot less distilled water than you do because I have a much smaller system. I probably check my electrolytes every month and a half, okay? And if I use 10 gallons of distilled water over a year, I'm probably over compensating. So,
let me explain. Let me explain the difference. The difference is we have two different battery technologies. That's one. You're using lead acid. We're using nickel iron. That's one thing. The other thing is that I'm still learning where I should set the charge points, the amount of voltage we're charging, the float points. I'm still learning how to do that for the optimal settings for us. So do I have it perfected yet? No, I don't. So that's why I check it so often, because I don't know, and I haven't had enough experience with this. 6 months I'm still learning. I'm still learning how this works. So you've had more experience, and over time when you have to check the batteries, because that's how it was the last time, and the time before that, and the time before that. So that's part of the difference.
And that's one of the reasons I mentioned the new technologies like silicon salt, and I talked about the new lithium batteries, and this is new Fisker battery that's out there now. That granted is in the context of electric vehicles, but it shouldn't be hard. They might even have something that is a deep cycle in lieu of a shallow cycle battery, because as we all know, shallow cycle batteries for lead acid is what's used in vehicles because it creates a large amount of amps in a small amount of period of time in order to start your engine, whereas deep cycle batteries, which are also lead acid, create a moderate amount of amps over a long period of time, and that's why they've been used for off-grid use for so long. But the technology is increasing to the point, and this is for you young people. Vince, you notice how I always like to give economic 101 analogies. Now think about the savings portfolio, think about the asset portfolio, and then think about the debt and liability column that a lot of young people have today, especially with the colleges where 90% of college degrees are virtually worthless. It's pretty much social indoctrination today. Now, think about this short conversation we've had already today. For you young people, for you millennials, okay, look at the derogatory things that the media says about you guys, living at home, having no savings, and snowflakes, cupcakes, all this stuff. This is an opportunity for you guys to change your own destiny and control your own destiny. 90% of people live in urban suburban America, okay? 99.9999% of those people live on the grid. Just think about if you were a proponent of decentralizing. This is a very, very potent word in the context of economy, finance, social, political issues. Decentralizing, which means that if 90% of the database who lives in urban suburban America was to go rural, that's a pretty big doggone database. people who don't know about off-grid living, people who know what it is, might know the definition of it, and the definition is very bland, very general. All it means is that you're not hooked up to the corporate electric grid, but you grow your own garden, you can raise your own animals. I mean, look at the lack of nutrition in today's soil, because the American soil has been mechanically and chemically burnt to smithereens. There's hardly any nutritional value in it. So you can compost, you can put the sulfur and the magnesium in, and your organic compost, and create your own soil. There's so much more to off-grid living. But think about the number one growth jobs in America, folks. Okay, you've heard me say that Trump inherited sabotage and demolition because the powers that be wanted to bring down America. I think most people realize this. Okay, if Hillary was in, we'd be in World War III. We wouldn't have a Constitution, a Bill of Rights anymore. We wouldn't have freedom of speech. This show would probably be off the air if Hillary was in. So what we're trying to do is give ideas and solutions to the bottom 93% so they can have a chance on having a good life and control their own destiny. The number one growth job in America right now, and it's not Trump's fault, is leisure and hospitality. Now, leisure and hospitality, with today's increasing home housing costs, which one day will come down dramatically, trust me on this one, because the generations at the bottom are not going to be able to afford these prices, or they're going to be priced out and be renters for the rest of their life, which means they're going to miss out on time leverage on their growth, assets, and principal accumulation. So if leisure and hospitality, which is like bartenders and waitresses and hotel staff, et cetera, is the only thing that's growing, with the number one job that's growing, that's not putting a lot of dollars in people's pocket. Now think about, for you young people, if you were to pick up on what we're saying right now and create expos and maybe do some off-grid examples and talk to people and create speaker programs and bring people in. We don't even have to bring people in. We have the Internet. We have GoToMeeting.com. We have Skype. We have so many tools, which I speak on a regular basis to people. I have people on a regular basis put a speakerphone in the room and I give a talk on whatever issue. The information is out there, and that's why you've heard me say net neutrality. That's why the Google, Facebooks, and Twitter want to become judge, jury, and executioner on the things that we read on the Internet under the guise of fake news and, it's racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe. No, what they want to do is curtail information to make you think a certain way so they can demonize, discredit, and delegitimize the individual. But they're destroying America. They're rewarding mediocrity. And ingenuity, productivity, and innovation, knowledge is all being thrown out the window with the baby in the bathwater. That's why the mainstream media loves satire. They love distractions. Okay? That's why race baiting and gender baiting and religion baiting and sexual orientation baiting is their number one pitch, if you will. Okay? The job is to manufacture perception, pity, guilt, and ideology. Okay? So what we need to do is sway public opinion and control our narratives, our themes, our talking points. Grab the microphone. You young people should be decentralizing, leaving urban, suburban America. Too many of the millennials are staying in urban, suburban America, which is exactly what the powers that be want. They want to narrow your scope of information and options. They want to control the masses. It's an addiction to power, money, and control from the top down. Think decentralization and living off-grid and thinking a different way and avoiding leisure and hospitality, putting some money in your pocket, and becoming more healthy by growing your own garden, raising your own animals, maybe hunting and fishing, maybe learning some of those lost 19th century skills, but dovetailing them with 21st century technology like a solar array. I've been living off-grid for about 11 years now, and I'll tell you right now, we are almost obsolete with the things that we have because of the new innovations. That's why I mentioned the battery examples. Now there's companies that you can literally buy everything that's already connected. You don't even have to connect all the things that I mentioned earlier, all the tools that I use. It comes on like a plywood plank, and everything's connected. All you do is connect all of that stuff to your solar array. So things are becoming easier. There's more information. I bet every community has people who live off-grid. If you want to get information like this, check out some community colleges. Here in northwest Montana, there's a guy by the name of Bill who gives classes on that. I had a neighbor buy some land off me. He did everything on his own because he took this class and read and researched. The information is out there, folks. You just got to pick it like a fruit off a tree. Vincent?
Very well put. And when we come back, we've got Truck Driver Jay on the line. Please stay with us, Truck Driver Jay. And I've got a comment about the bottom 93%. We'll be right back. Rich Scheben's with us. And Rich, I believe, if I understood correctly, previously on this broadcast hour, you mentioned that you were putting wood in the wood stove. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So, class, here's the point. So, Rich Scheben is broadcasting, and we're talking about off-grid living. And during the commercial break, runs over, puts some wood in the wood stove. Why? Well, he needs the heat. So this is the kind of stuff we do. Now, during the last break, just now, I ran down to the location where we have the inverter, the solar chargers, and the battery bank, and I checked to see if we had enough electricity to continue the broadcast simultaneously and run the lights in the studio and the computers in the studio. And we have a guest here at the farmhouse who just decided to visit us, which is wonderful. And Mrs. Finelli is with him in the kitchen, and she wanted to wash dishes in the dishwasher, which means that the well pump is going to kick on during that process. So I wanted to find out if all that would work at the same time. So I had to check the meters to see if we had enough electricity to do all that, and we do. So that's what it's like. That is really what it's like. So if Rich is cold, he can say, you know what, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to get colder and colder and colder. Or he can make the effort and refill the wood stove. Okay? We do the same thing. We can look at the thermostat and say, wow, it's getting colder. And it's still getting colder. It's getting even colder. And we can say, well, we're not going to do anything about that. Or we can say, you know what, we could die if we don't fill up that wood stove. And that's what we do. That's what Rich Scheben does. It's a lot different from just saying we set the thermostat at 68, 69, 70, 71, whatever the number is in the wintertime. It's a lot different from just setting the thermostat and paying the electric bill or the gas bill or the gas and the electric bill or the gas and the or the oil bill and the electric bill. It's more complicated than that. It involves planning. Did I say that accurately from your perspective, Rich Scheben?
Oh, absolutely. But you got to think about what the alternative choices are today. I mean, look at we have demographics, unbelievable, highest debt ever, consumer, corporation, government. We have a credit collapse, and that's why the flattening of the yield curve is occurring. Pensions and valuation headwinds are definitely going to slow future rates of growth. Then you blame the central bank, corrupt monetary policies, Keynesian economics, group identity politics, a.k.a. victim group status, protectionist group status. The game is so rigged that everything about the future is speculation and hedging. Everything. Unless you're in the top 1 or 2%, there's absolutely no way to control your own destiny in a fascist system. Well, only 4 to 6% of Americans make their primary income from being self-employed. And we're entering a whole new industrial revolution with robotics, automation, and artificial intelligence, and the technocracy that goes with it. We talked before, Vince, where Intel just admitted that they, for at least 3 years, they have the chips and processors where they've been not just listening to us, but basically archiving every key that we hit, every letter and number that we hit on our keyboard. So, you know, we have a situation that we're living in a censorship, surveillance, police state that's kind of like a virtual reality, politically correct Twilight Zone episode, to be honest with you. So when I talk about leisure and hospitality being the number one job growth area or arena, that doesn't really give a lot of confidence to today's youth. And that's why living off-grid and doing things a certain way might be the only choice left in this economy. Vince?
Yeah, great point. And when we come back, I'd like to address what you said about the bottom 93%. I am in total agreement with it, but I've got a couple comments about the bottom 93%. Class, if you're in the bottom 93%, you might want to keep that dial tuned to usaprepares.com. You might agree with what I'm about to say. So Rich Scheben and I'll be right back after top of the hour news and commercial announcements. offgridmontana.com. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2. USA Prepares. Rich Scheben's with us. Rich, you were talking about the bottom 93%. I want to make sure it's absolutely clear that when you and I mention the bottom 93%, that no one mistakes what we're saying, that we're talking down to anyone. We are not talking down to the bottom 93% because we are the bottom 93%. Rich Scheben is part of the bottom 93%, and so am I. And so is everyone else who is an instructor here at USA Prepares. Those who are successful are still part of the bottom 93%. We don't own multiple jets. We don't own multiple homes all over the world. We don't have servants. We are all hardworking people, all of us. And whether we are retired or not, we're still hardworking. And I just wanted to make sure that it was not misunderstood that we're not talking down to the bottom 93%, because we are the bottom 93%. Any disagreement, Rich?
Oh, I totally agree. In fact, that's one of the reasons that sometimes when you do a lot of radio shows or talks and things like that, you kind of take semantic shortcuts. And that's one of the reasons I always say I'm sticking up for the little guy, the bottom 93%, the socioeconomical depressed. I don't care what skin pigmentation, what gender you are, what sexual orientation, religion, ideology, philosophy, generation. See, the powers that be are doing everything to distract, dumb down, and divide us and get us at each other's throat. The powers that be need chaos and infighting in order to not just have a divide and conquer strategy, but to lower the bars of standards and expectations, which eliminates the ability for the bottom 93% to control their own destiny. And that's why you hear me talking about practice what you preach laws and things of that nature. It's not, we're getting too caught up on what we think is ideology. And it's not. That's what the powers that be are manufacturing. Ideology is maybe 5 to 10% of it. The rest of it is the aristocracy versus the serfs. Don't get stuck on this left-right paradigm, because it's absolutely manufactured. It's false. It's phony. In fact, Vince, can I have the air for about a minute and a half and just address what I just said?
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Now, we hear the term liberal versus conservative, and I'll, you know what, Democrat, Republican, there's maybe a 5% difference. As far as liberal versus conservative, I'll buy into that a little more. But think about some of the things that people have been, that the so-called left, what's the left, liberal, Democrat. I think most of us who listen to this show realize that this has been hijacked by the globalists, okay? You have to ask yourself some of the things that they're doing. Is it liberal to call people Nazis, sexual, violent rapists, and eliminate the right to think, speak, and communicate? Is it liberal to censor books, websites, and words? Is it liberal to have science be bought and paid for and gag orders implemented to scientists and global warming proponents or opponents? And that's one of the reasons why I think people are waking up to the fact that we are being geoengineered with hundreds of patents that controls weather. Go to Dane Wigington's website, geoengineeringwatch.org, and you'll find out that global warming is a hoax and it is manufactured. Is it liberal to have 90% of Monsanto shareholders vote to not disclose GMO ingredients? Another great reason to live off-grid. Is it liberal? A Democrat congressman saying to Kellyanne Conway that she looks familiar being on her knees when she was sitting on the sofa in the Oval Office. Is it liberal that Joy Behar calling Bill Clinton's rape victims tramps? Is it liberal to change the definition of fascism post-2009? Is it liberal to normalize pedophilia? Even the New York Times was on record saying that it's not a crime, and they were defending NAMBLA, and I believe that acronym stands for the North American Man-Boy Love Association. I'm not making this up. Is it liberal to change the definition of marriage, same-sex, marrying children, marrying pets, marrying farm animals, trees, computers, and other inanimate objects? This is all happening in America. Is it liberal to eliminate the Bill of Rights and Constitution under the guise of globalism? Is it liberal that a New York assemblyman unveils a bill to suppress non-government-approved free speech? Is it liberal to lower the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job and keeping a job based on what group you're in? In other words, degrading minorities by saying you can't compete or your work is suboptimal. Is it liberal to destroy America by rewarding mediocrity? Is it liberal to allow the wealthy to buy sedition, treason, espionage via NGOs and MSM and the court system? Is it liberal for the central banks to print money and give 95% of it to the top 7%? Is it liberal to bail out the bit too big to fail and too big to jail at the expense of the bottom 93%? Is it liberal to manipulate and naked short precious metals? Is it liberal to force feed Marx, Alinsky, Cloward, and Piven and the Communist Manifesto down Americans' throat? Is it liberal to teach young kids as young as 5 and 6 in public schools to give BJs and gender identity to little kids in public schools that young? Is it liberal to divide the American people by race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, etc.? Folks, this is not a left-right paradigm. It's an addiction to power, money, and control. It's the people at the top who want to control the masses. People, that's why they want to control. They use the mainstream media to control the memes, the themes, the talking points, and the narratives. And that's why the mainstream media had this "let's kill the cops" thing, okay? And certain people on the so-called left came out as proponents of this. I promise you, cops, there are some bad cops, but there's bad everybody. I'm at the top of the list as far as being an imperfect sinner. Trust me, we all are. But I'll tell you, when you look at the lawyers, the judges, and the bankers, they have created 1,000,000 times more damage for their own greed and their addiction to power, money, and control because they are puppets of the elitists. 8 people in the world have a higher net worth than half of the globe combined. Remember, follow the money. It's the same thing with follow the narrative. Follow the theme, the talking points, and control the microphone. And this is why we need public forums for the people, for the bottom 93%. And this show is one of them. But there's not a lot of them. But people are waking up. And this is why I say read, research, and share information using objective facts in lieu of subjective emotional opinions. We all need to participate however we can. You don't have to write a book or go on a radio show or give talks. There's many different ways to do it. You could take the bull by the horns and take what we were discussing earlier, especially if you're a young person. Get out of urban, suburban America. Decentralize. Get your buddies together. Create an off-grid farm. Start controlling your own destiny. I mean, you were mentioning in the beginning of the show about your health, Vince. You know, and I talked about briefly about the soil content being so overused and hardly any nutrition left in our soil. You know, how many people talk about gluten intolerance? There's hundreds of geoengineered proteins out there. Okay, it's done to increase the shelf life after the grain is cut on the ground and shelf life on the in the store. It's all meant for profit. It's all, and our bodies can't process this stuff because it's been so geoengineered. Okay? The immune system, for those of you who take pharmaceutical drugs, the immune system deals with 6 main factors: inflammation, circulation, allergies, infection, detoxification, and cancers and tumors. If you're taking pharmaceutical drugs for these, you're taking poison, okay? Now, there's some benefits for acute care, but for chronic care, it does a lot of harm. And if you could grow your own produce, eat meat without steroids, hormones, and antibiotics, that's non-GMO, that's lean with low cholesterol, you can do so many benefits for the homeostasis of your body. But think about what I mentioned regarding the number one growth industry, leisure and hospitality. As we enter a new era of robotics, automation, and artificial intelligence, your destiny will be spoken for. If you can start thinking outside the box and having communication instead of having your head down and your thumbs moving all the time on some type of electronic device where the powers that be know your every move. Remember, smart means spy. Okay? You can control your own destiny a little more and be a little more human. But the benefit is the information that you could teach and share with others. And that's where that's more important than probably anything. But remember, we're all imperfect sinners, and we all have learning curves. So we need to stand for principle. And that's the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. Truth. And if they do it, you do it. I don't care what gender, what skin pigmentation, what sexual orientation. We need to stand for principle. And if we stood for principle, more and more people would wake up, and these hijacked, politically correct buzzwords would be eliminated in our semantic dictionary controlled by the elite. Vince?
You know, as you were saying this, I was thinking about exactly what you said, follow the money. And let me just read an article, class. Radio host Patrick Kiley gets 20 years in Ponzi scheme. StarTribune.com. Judge describes Patrick Kiley as the voice that lured hundreds of ordinary folks into a $194 million nationwide scheme. Goes on to say, a small-time Minneapolis salesman found his niche on the radio, peddling investments in foreign currencies, was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for his role in a $194 million Ponzi scheme that built more than 700 investors nationwide. Tell you a little bit more about it when we come back. So, class, we're talking about follow the money. Patrick Kiley, I'm continuing to read this article on StarTribune.com. So, Patrick Kiley, 75, had attracted 70% of the investors through his former radio program called Follow the Money, which was broadcast on a Christian shortwave radio network. He bought time on about 200 radio stations at its peak, and he appealed to listeners with a pitch that fomented distrust of the U.S. government and fanned fears about a cratering stock market. So he was sentenced to prison. And so what we've tried to do here at USA Prepares is kind of teach you that just because you read about it, just because you hear about it on the radio, doesn't mean it's absolutely positively true. So, you know, we're talking about follow the money, and that's what you need to do in everything when it comes to spending your money and investing your money. And let's talk about Ponzi schemes. You know, we know about Bernie Madoff, but what about the Ponzi scheme called Social Security? What about the Ponzi schemes called pension plans? What about the Ponzi scheme called fractional banking, where new debt is required to keep the system afloat? We are surrounded by Ponzi schemes. Rich, your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. We have over $1 million in credit cards, school loan, and automobile debt, and that's one of the reasons why I talk about here and there about the flattening of the yield curve, because the yield curve could actually invert long-term interest rates or bonds would be a lower price than the short term, because everybody knows when you borrow money short term, that should be a lot less. You pay back a lot less, or excuse me, a lot less long term than short term. Okay, so the point is that nothing's really adding up. You look at today's, and that's why I talk about bonds and treasury bonds and interest rates, because treasuries, they have an inverse proportion between the value and the yield of the bond, but they have a direct proportion between the bond itself. Well, let me give some examples, okay? Because I can see I can make this too confusing. American corporations are literally leveraged to the hilt, okay? We have the highest level of U.S. GDP since the last Great Recession, 2008, the last collapse. 2 years, corporations issued $1 trillion in new debt, okay? Not for expansion, not for new products or services or people or employees. Basically, to boost earnings per share, when the new debt goes to share buybacks, which is buying back your own debt, dividends, and executives' cash, like stock options. So the zero interest rate policy, which now we can't leave, because if we raise interest rates, everything could collapse. Everything. So as investors chase yields, especially pension funds, and they're taking higher risk by owning corporate bonds over U.S. Treasuries, the high-yield junk bonds, okay, won't be able to pay back investors. In fact, it's going to be a major default. And the margin debt is an all-time high, which basically forced sales of assets or collateral, or however you want to call it, will trigger a huge collapse. So we're in a situation that it is a Ponzi scheme, from pensions to evaluations. I mean, you got to ask yourself, what do a lot of these terms mean anymore? We're, solvency, P ratios. It's all very surreal. So what we need to do is figure out what's going to be best for us as individuals and wake up as many people along the way as we can. And I think that I could probably find in one day 10 articles that are proponents of gold and silver and precious metals, 10 articles that aren't, 10 articles that are proponents of cryptocurrencies, even though there's like 880 of them out there, and a minimum will survive after the whatever washout period or bubble bursts on them. So you really got to invest in your skill sets and land and acreage and rural property and being debt-free and solar and learning new ways of living. Vince?
Well, it's not easy, class. You're going to, if you're going to join this lifestyle, you're going to have to do some homework. Rich Scheben with us. Hey, Rich, I've got a comment. It's kind of on a lighter side of what we're talking about, but it will illustrate what's happening in the United States of America. Now, many, if not most people, will grin and bear it, but a few don't. What am I talking about? Okay. Some people go to the movie theater. So how much does a movie theater ticket cost? Well, the current average movie theater ticket cost in the United States is $8.12. But some pay more, even double, for upgraded features such as 3D movies or premiere seating. Okay. Next, how much does it cost to eat these overpriced snacks at a movie theater? Well, for the AMC Corporation, a large, and I'm going to round these numbers, okay? For small popcorn, which is almost free to make, literally, I'm not kidding. Popcorn has the highest percentage markup of any item that you could consume that I could think of. A small popcorn at AMC is between $6 and $7. I'm rounding these numbers. Medium popcorn is $7 to $8. Large, $8 to $9. What are we talking about? popcorn. All right, so let's say we might want something different. Let's say a large popcorn and a drink. It'd be almost $15. This is not for a family of 5. This is one large popcorn and one large drink. Large popcorn and 2 drinks, about $21. If you wanted movie nachos and a large drink, $13. If you want a child's popcorn, a drink, and Fruity Tooty, that would be between $7 and $10. Now, that's how much it costs to go to the movie theater. Well, here's something interesting. So this woman decided that she wasn't going to put up with that. And what she did was she had like a bowl, maybe like a salad bowl, but this thing was polystyrene. So she put this bowl under her sweatshirt, and it made her look pregnant. So in this bowl, I
can hear it right now. People, man in the background. I'm not the father. I'm not the father. Pardon me. I digress.
So this woman has this big bowl, and she's holding it up as if there's, a lot of weight in here. It's like, gosh, this child, this unborn child, getting heavy. And she's got her snacks in there so she can go to the movie and enjoy her snacks. Now, what are some of the problems? Well, can you bring your own food to AMC Corporation, the movie theater corporation, which is the largest in the country? Well, some people can bring their food in, but AMC Entertainment Incorporated, one of the country's largest movie chains, has an outright ban on bringing your own food into the movie theater. But some people say, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway. The point I'm trying to make is that this young woman who is appearing to be pregnant because she's got her snacks in this bowl that makes her look pregnant is doing so because of the high cost of going to the movie theater. Okay? She's not willing to put up with a large popcorn and a large drink at $15, which is insane unless you are above the bottom 93%. The rest of us think that that's a lot of money for popcorn. Heck, I don't know what the current cost of a 50-pound bag of unpopped popcorn is at Sam's Club, but I'll bet it's around $20 for 50 pounds of unpopped popcorn. So you can be sure that the movie theaters are making a huge profit on this. And that's just one example of how we are being fleeced by large corporations. Some people grin and bear it. Vinny doesn't grin and bear it. Vinny doesn't do that. Vinny hasn't been to a movie. I can't remember the last time I've been fleeced for a movie ticket. And, I hear people talking about these movies, and they go, well, that was okay. Really? So you went to the movie theater and you bought the ticket and popcorn and a drink and you've been fleeced and it was okay? Really? Don't go. Don't go. Heck, for less than the cost of a movie ticket, popcorn, and a drink, you can buy probably a couple cases of cans of food at Aldi. And you can prepare. And when that movie's over and you say, well, it's just okay, it's gone. What did you learn? The money's gone and you haven't prepared. When you could have, if you had taken the family on a learning adventure and gone to Aldi's or whatever outlet has great prices on food and preparedness items. And I'm not talking about spending and squandering a fortune. I'm talking about buying food. And what's the worst thing that could happen? You'll have to eat it. That's the worst possible thing that could happen if you buy food. And if you buy food that you like to eat. Certainly don't buy things you don't like. Because if you don't like them now, you're probably not going to like them later. So buy things that you like to eat. And please consider preparing for the long run rather than squandering for that instant pleasure of going to the movie theater. I can't, for the life of me, I can't think of a single reason to go to the movie theater. I can't. Heck, for the price of one ticket to the movie theater, starve through the movie and without the popcorn and the large drink, just a movie ticket, over $8. You could get Netflix and actually watch some videos on your home screen and learn things. Have I lost my mind with Scheben?
No. I'll be honest with you, I probably see maybe 2 movies in movie theaters per year. Shooting from the hip, it's a total guess. And 90, everybody I talk to, 98% of the movies absolutely stink because they're full of subliminal messaging and often overt as well. What they're trying to do is lower the bars of standards and expectations and distract them down and divide us by groups. And distractions are so important for the elite right now, and that's why the average American spends 7 to 8 hours per day watching TV or being on their smartphone. What we need to do is bring back intellectual conversation. What we need to do is bring back some health communication and conversations. What we need to do is, what if there was restaurants? There's a lot of talk about entertainment, like musicians and singers and comedians. Most of it who are signing the dotted line in the back room to basically carry the left agenda, which is the globalist agenda. Okay, remember I gave that little lecture about is it liberal? Okay, it's not left-right paradigm. That's ideology is a very small part of it. They take advantage of the low-information vote of the super wealthy. That's why a lot of the globalist/Democrats are of that elite class, and they socially indoctrinate the lower socioeconomic classes and give them a free phone or food stamps or whatever, and they're buying votes. If we had intellectual communication, what if every restaurant, well, not every restaurant, but certain restaurants actually brought in speakers to talk about off-grid living, self-sufficiency, and talk about topics that are politically incorrect, even have lectures on political correctness or incorrectness, and show how it's dumbed down to people with Common Core, et cetera, et cetera. People are waking up, and if we could create venues beyond talk radio where we can wake up the people. In fact, speaking of talk radio, I don't know, Vince, if you've heard of Candace Owens. She's like red pill black or red pill black pill or something. She used to be a liberal Democrat feminist just a year and a half ago. And she's a young black lady, I'm guessing, 20, 25 years old. But she's way more articulate and eloquent in speech than me, which is not hard to do. And she totally talks about how she was demonized, discredited, and delegitimized by all mediums because she woke up and started to say it like it is. And that's what the people do. To destroy America and reward mediocrity, she says she was tired of being a victim. And they wanted to indoctrinate her because she was young, she was black, she was a Democrat, and that's the way you're supposed to be, not think outside the box or think for yourself. So she literally comes out on talk radio and says, I'm tired of being a victim. And I can tell you really want to comment on this, so please go ahead.
Well, I have to laugh. I really do. Because you're talking about having, these meetings and maybe at a restaurant and getting people together and talk about politically incorrect things. and I have. As a radio broadcaster, as a farmer, I did that. And as a expo promoter, I did that. And so for 5 years I did that, talked about politically incorrect things. And, sometimes there were over 100 people at the meetings, sometimes there were fewer, as many as over 300 at one point. And as a result of speaking out about politically incorrect things, I got thrown out of my own meetup. the meetup group decided, they took a vote, and they threw out Norm Shealy. They decided that they didn't want to hear what he had to say, and so the same people who said, Dr. Sheila, I've got this ache, I've got this pain. Geez, ow, that hurts. My blood pressure's high. What about this inflammation? What about this swelling? Dr. Sheila, can you help me for free? They threw him out, and then they decided, you know what? We don't need Finelli either. Let's throw him out. So how does it work? Hey, by the way, I want to thank everybody in the meetup group for freeing me and setting me free so I don't waste any more time with you guys. No kidding. Boy, am I furious about all the time I wasted trying to help people and teach them. And I'm glad I'm done with it. Rich Scheben, offgridmontana.com. And you can check out his book at offgridmontana.com, or you can go to Amazon.com and you can order it there as well. One New York Man's Journey to Off-Grid Living in Montana. Rich, you talked about decentralization. I got a call from Craig Douglas the day before yesterday. He's one of our instructors. He said he was in the area, and I said, well, come on over. So he came over and spent the day with us, and we talked about cows, and we went for a walk. I went for about a mile walk here on the farm, and I showed him decentralization for cows. And what we do when we raise Angus cows here, and what we do is we let them eat the grass on fields, but we divide the fields into areas, paddocks if you will, where they can eat it for a while, and then we move them on to the next paddock or field, and then the next one. And so they get a chance to eat grass in a particular field or paddock for between 1 and 3 days, typically. And then we move on to the next fresh grass. And the reason for that is we want the grass to recover rather than being trampled. Now, that is decentralization. Now, we can compare that to what some of our neighbors do. And let me give you an example. So in the wintertime, we have these rolls of hay, and they weigh about 1,000 pounds apiece. Cows eat about 30 pounds of hay per day, 30 pounds. And they drink about 30 gallons of water per day. Now, this is each. So 100 cows would drink about 3,000 gallons of water total, and 100 cows would eat about 3,000 pounds of hay per day total. What some farmers do is they'll just take a roll of hay and they'll just pick it up with the front end loader or the back spears on their tractor and drop it in the field and let the cows eat it. And what happens is all the cows are in a circle, the hay is in the middle, and you have cow poop that looks like a donut around the bale of hay. And they might drop 3 bales of hay if they have 100 cows. They'll have 3 donuts with cow poop and destroyed grass under the cow's hooves. What we do is we unroll the hay in, as much as 1/8 of a mile strips. One roll of hay would cover about 1/8 of a mile, 5 feet wide. And we let them eat it, and some will stand in the hay, but most will be on either side of the hay, and they'll poop on either side of the hay, fertilizing the field. The next roll doesn't go there. It goes in a new strip that they haven't stepped on yet. And then the next roll after that goes in a new strip. So we'll feed them 3 times a day, 1,000 pounds of hay per feeding, 3 times a day, and they fertilize the field. And that's decentralization. So when it rains, that those cow pies don't pollute the streams and waterways as much, and nowhere near as much, as the other method, which concentrates the cow pies in these donut rings. That's decentralization. It doesn't smell. If you take the donut rings, that really smells. Okay, but not what we do. So decentralization is a really good thing. So I just wanted to give an analogy, another example of what decentralization is with cows. Now, if you take a city and you're all centralized into one city where about 90% of people live, what do you do with all that cow manure? Man, oh man, that's a big problem, right? Because it's centralized. Well, actually, it's not cow manure, is it? It would be human manure. Your thoughts, Rich?
Well, that's why hepatitis and a lot of diseases are on the increase because there's so many people living in an urban suburban area. But there are people who are listening. People are tired of the cookie cutter follower politically correct subdivision mentality. And I'm reading articles that young people, millennials, are going to rural America and doing organic gardening. So people are waking up and realizing that they need to control their own destiny, Vince.
And millennials who are paying attention to this and listen to what we say and understand what we say are agreeing with us. They're saying, you're right. You're absolutely right. We need to pay attention, and we need to take control of our own destinies. And I'm so glad that they're doing that. Rich Scheben, thank you so much for being with us, sharing your non-replaceable time every Monday.
Always my pleasure.